Yeah, it's not. It's not on Facebook. I don't think. Oh, it's not gonna be. Oh,
Check, check, check.
check.
Do a room check, check.
Check 1 2.
Gata. Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Check.
Check 1 2. I'm live.
Okay. Hmm? I wouldn't reference it at all. Well, since
Greetings, disciples and disciple makers of Christ. I am Moody Colorado, Superintendent of the Northeast District. I am delighted to welcome you to today's event, Leading Through the Pandemic. I am excited to be a part of this event, a discipleship in the new normal. Pastors suddenly are in front of the camera like a celebrity. We have no other way but live through it. I am glad we are doing this, and I thank Scott and Matt for their leadership. This is precisely what we are about, making disciples so that the church can function in the way of making more disciples and transforming the disciples into disciple makers also in whatever challenge we have. Every discipleship event is a step to making church leaders and pastors. And I know this to be true, at least in myself. My trainings in Vacation Church School, missions and evangelism, they all pushed me and transformed me by from being a disciple into a disciple maker. We are now in the situation wherein we can do discipleship making without commuting to the venue. So if you have an event in your local church, in your cluster or circuit, and it's something that you can share with other churches. The other churches that are not that maybe are smaller churches. So how about inviting others to zoom in right from their own home office? I encourage the Northeast District to develop your disciple making in such a way that many others could zoom in. Like this one today, this is not limited to the Northeast District only. This event welcomes all in the conference in Iowa. So I welcome you all that joined us from within the Iowa Conference. The Spirit of Christ, the Lord of the Church, be with you. Amen.
Welcome, friends. I'm Pastor Scott Kober, and
I'm Pastor Matt German.
hey, we're pleased to be able to join with you in our fellowship hall to discuss leading during the pandemic and beyond, and really thank Moody Colorado for that welcome and for his leadership and his working with us to make this event what it has become. It's a crazy time to be a leader in the United Methodist Church in general, but certainly during a pandemic. And so we look forward to sharing with you some of the things we've learned by leading during the pandemic. So one of the pandemic happenings for my family and myself has been the inclusion of puzzles. Did you celebrate on Friday? National Puzzle Day was Friday.
Oh, I didn't get that memo.
Well, you should have. Yes, National Puzzle Day was Friday, and for Christmas I asked, for the first time ever, I've never asked for a puzzle for Christmas, but I asked for a puzzle, and I've been thinking about just how that's a pervasive thing during the pandemic. In fact, I read somewhere that upwards of 400% increase in the sales of puzzles.
A lot of time on our hands, apparently.
Apparently, that's the thing, yeah. And the last time there was this much of a surge in puzzle, wanting to work with puzzles was the Great Depression. So not surprising that here we are again in puzzle times. Here's a picture of me working my puzzle, my Christmas gift, and as you can see, I'm totally into it in at least that moment. I've never asked for a puzzle before, but I think there's a metaphor. There's some truth to the fact that leadership in the church right now is like trying to solve a puzzle. Maybe as you do the thing, you know.
I'm with you.
So yeah. So you see what I'm saying about puzzles. If we avoid the problem solving before the pandemic, like if we weren't really focused, the pandemic forced us to start solving problems that perhaps we weren't even aware that we had before. And so the pandemic has forced us to do puzzle solving as leaders within the church. What puzzling have you had to do as a pastor or a lay leader within your church? What's been puzzling you, and how have you gone about solving it? We want to consider that today as we gather in our workshops this afternoon. What puzzles have you been able to solve in the various ministry areas that we discuss today? I'm not proud of it, but we didn't finish that puzzle. In fact, you can see a picture here of my wife. She gave up at some point, just sacked out.
Poor Karen.
Karen hates puzzles, and I brought this whole puzzle work into our lives. But what puzzling have we had to do? And if you've gotten discouraged, I'm right there with you. It's true of my puzzle making, and at times in this past year, I've gotten discouraged as well in striving to be a leader with all of you. But we strive to be a congregation that helps to teach leadership. It's part of our discipleship pathway. We have a moment where we have people considered leadership of the church, and we have classes that we use, the local lay servant class and sending folks to school for lay ministry. All those are ways that we have been developing leaders within our church, and that we promote within the district and across the conference. And so we're really into those things. Ultimately, it's about being an encouraging church, a congregation that encourages and teaches and focus on leadership. So if you're going to be that kind of church, we thought, well, we should be the kind of people who try to offer what we've learned and begin to model that that process.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some things that we've discovered over the last year or so, but also come to you with a place of deep humility and knowing that I'm a teachable dude and that I haven't figured all this out yet. We're just sharing some of the stuff that we've experienced, and I'm sure there's a wealth of things that we can be learning from you as well. So this is just part of us encouraging the gift of the connection. And hopefully these conversations can continue beyond this conversation, knowing that we all most of us attending this may be ministry professionals, but I don't know that any of us are claiming to be experts today. And I was thinking about this a little bit this morning as I was doing my devotions as you were preaching through Genesis. It reminded me of a story earlier in Genesis, the call of Abraham in Genesis 12, chapter 1, where God actually calls upon Abraham and says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you." And he goes on to say that I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars, and I will lead you to this land that I will show you. I got to say that I feel like we're on this journey right now of a destination that is unknown. I've never pastored in a pandemic. I graduated seminary in 2013, and the word pandemic never came up in the 3 years of training that I did for my Master's of Divinity degree. And in the 2 years that I was a provisional elder, none of those words came up. We're learning alongside of you as well. And, they followed a pillar of fire by day and a pillar of cloud, a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, these signs that God was giving them to pursue this destination that God wanted them to go on. And I think we're depending on fire and cloud in many ways right now. We're depending upon the Holy Spirit's leading. And what that requires of us is adaptability and willing to innovate, right? And I don't think we've arrived yet. We've not arrived to our destination, wherever that's supposed to land. But what I do know is we have to be willing to go, and we have to be willing to change our direction when necessary, as the Holy Spirit is prompting and guiding us. Because here's one thing that I do know. I'm 35 years old. I'm kind of a youngster in the life of the annual conference, but I've been in professional ministry for almost 20 years. And in the 20 years that I've been in ministry, I've never seen a place in the church where we've been given permission to be more innovative, where no one is really saying we've never done it that way before anymore, because everyone knows we have to do things differently. This isn't just in the church. This is pervasive in all of our culture and everything
Yeah.
that we do. So that said, we're still depending on fire and cloud, and we're trusting God to lead us on this journey. And
Yeah.
we don't know where we're going yet.
I think that's helpful. And just to go back to my puzzle analogy on this case, I can't tell you how many times that when I was working on the puzzle, when I hadn't given up yet, I would look at the top of the box that showed what I was, striving for, right? So I would look at that over and over again, and it's kind of, part of a strategy for puzzle making is looking at where you're headed, right? Have a clear, compelling picture of things for puzzle making. I think that's true of leadership as well. We here in our congregation had gone through a visioning process in which we had named how we were going to, focus on the mission of making disciples to transform the world. What does that look like? We had a discipleship pathway for that we created and started to talk about. But because we had that in place and because we had a vision statement, it gave us an idea as to, okay, this is what we picture. And we want to get towards this, and the way how are we going to look like that now that we've got to do it in a pandemic, right? So how do we gather for inspiring worship in a pandemic? How do we grow disciples when we can't gather in small groups in the way we would want to? But how do we do that now through Zoom links or some opportunity like that? How do we go about helping people serve in ministry and develop their servant leadership? Those things were true before the pandemic as how we visioned to be the church, and they became even more important for us to think about in the experience of the pandemic. So our vision statement is to love first, let's gather, grow, go together. And love first is so much a part of what is needed in this past year as well. So that those focusing words, the teachings of Jesus are the mantra we have there to love God, love your neighbor as yourself, and to find ways to gather, grow, go together in ministry. So having that compelling picture was a component that I think has helped us.
It was kind of the
during the
launch pad
pandemic.
that everything is based off. If what we're doing doesn't point to this, it's not what we're about. It's not who we are.
Yeah. So there are times in my puzzle making, literal puzzle making, that probably was the reason that I got discouraged, was that there would be times I would notice that pieces weren't going together in the puzzle, and I had a dickens of a time kind of moving forward because they weren't going. And then I would notice that something was off about a particular piece of the puzzle, that it looked like it was the right piece of the puzzle, but when I got to looking at it closer, I noticed it was not the right piece. It wasn't supposed to go there in the first place. It kind of fit, but I shouldn't have put it there, So that too has been something that I've been thinking about, noticing what's there, and when it's wrong, removing that piece of the puzzle, having the confidence to say, that's just not the right fit, and we've got to try something else. So those kind of moments of failure that happen in puzzle making are also been things that have happened for us in our leadership, right? We've had moments where, that just isn't working. We tried to do the Zoom thing where we had people gather after our online worship. A few people stayed, but they really didn't engage much. And so it's like, well, for us, that really wasn't working. Maybe we'll give it another try. We'll try to do a different focus, because for whatever reason, that just wasn't striking it. You got to notice these things to be able to go forward. It reminds me of back at the beginning of the pandemic, we were doing a sermon series on Foolish Church, a plug for our good friend Lee Schott and her work, Foolish Church. And in that book, she talks about the importance of noticing, and that the church needs to be a community that notices. Noticing is so important. During that same time period in the spring, it was March, and the pandemic was really starting to come on strong. And I had signed up to be a part of a gathering that was going to happen in Waterloo Franklin Covey, you know, the calendar people. Yeah, so they were going to be doing a workshop on unconscious bias, which I was really into. I really thought this would be a good thing to be a part of, a continuing ed event. And then the pandemic broke out, and then it became a Zoom thing, and so that was my first time of doing kind of a Zoom webinar deal, and you know, trying to figure out how that all works. But at one point, they're talking about noticing, and that unconscious bias is really about being able to notice things and notice them well. And they brought up the point that there are 11 million pieces of information that are coming at us. And that even though that's the case, our human ability is only able to process 40 pieces of information at a time. But there are 11 million things coming at us. So what we do is we create an unconscious bias to try to filter all those out that we cannot handle. We create these ways of kind of shortcutting the understanding process, and it's because of that we have blind spots, that we have an unconscious bias. We don't notice because we're not thinking outside of our comfort zone of what's normal for us. We can't believe and stand up for people if we haven't heard them, if we haven't noticed their needs.
I mean, 2020 has been, it's rocked all of our world. I mean, we've been dealing with a pandemic. We are still in the midst of this general conference thing where, you know, talk about going to a place we don't know where we're going to land, right? Most of our churches have anxiety around that. And then, of course, you know, a contentious election season and racial tensions within our country. I mean, it's not just been the difficulty of a pandemic, and I think so many of our leaders have been tired and worn because of everything that we've been dealing with simultaneously. But I think 2020 has been so much more than just the pandemic. You know, the brutal death of George Floyd and many other racial injustice has been at the forefront of our American and, frankly, our global consciousness. And as heartbreaking as I think those deaths were that made the news, what we've been hearing is some of our African American siblings have been saying that this perhaps is a time that they feel most hopeful because it's a time in their lifetime where they feel like they're being heard, perhaps for the first time. I was recently reading an account of Lyndon B. Johnson's push to end segregation and studying some of these Jim Crow laws in the U.S. from the 60s. And it occurred to me that in the world of Lyndon B. Johnson, the world that he was born into, that world was only barely accepting of the fact that the color of your skin shouldn't be a barrier to something, such as using a bathroom or what drinking fountain you use. And almost everyone, and I guess, Scott, I wish I could say everyone, almost everyone, would feel that something like that today would be inconceivable and incomprehensible today. But there was a mind shift that happened in the 60s that shifted in a cultural moment, and I think we're experiencing that again today. And, you know, we've come a long way, but also acknowledging that we have a long way to go. And as for myself, in leading a congregation, not only through a pandemic, but through a denominational turmoil and all the things that are going on in the world, you know, I want to be part of that solution. Our call still hasn't changed in the midst of that. So we have to ask ourselves, we have to be talking about some of those things as we've been doing this last year. Sometimes that's been through the pulpit, sometimes that's been through small groups or social distant coffee with members of our church. But I also got to say, it hasn't always been the popular message either, right? Yeah. To love first. But, you know, there's a reason the Bible says a prophet is not welcome in their own town, I suppose. But it doesn't prevent the obligation that we have as leaders to partake in truth-telling no matter what is going on in the world and in the church, even when it's truth that people don't want to hear at times. But I think by naming truth, it's how we help people notice, as you were saying. You know, while all the issues of race aren't solved by by any stretch. I'm hoping and praying things will never be the same again, that justice is being advanced, and that what was acceptable in 2019 won't be acceptable any longer in 2021 and beyond. And the church has a place in that.
Right. So, overall, just the pandemic and the experiences of 2020, which are somewhat because of the pandemic and all that's wrapped up in that, we've had to adapt. We've had to focus on adapting as leaders and making changes where perhaps we would have never focused on making changes before, creating a vision perhaps, or recreating the vision that we had before into the image of what's going to work now that we're limited in some ways of doing things as we hadn't before. So in all cases, it's about organizing and reorganizing and kind of shifting and shuffling as the work of our pastoral work, the ministry of lay servants, and how they can be of service in the world, and engaging them and equipping them to be in ministry. We as leaders, lay and clergy, struggle with change. I mean, it's just kind of a overall concept that there's a lot of conflict that comes out of just changing the carpet, right? I mean, just selecting a change that probably needs to take place, but you go from blue to red, and it could be a problem, right?
Divide the church.
Yeah, you can divide the church in just a simple way. But the good news about the pandemic is that in some ways it forced us to make changes and do things in new ways that give us permission to make some changes where we possibly needed to make those changes all along, and to make them so that we might reach out into our world in a new way. Everything we wanted to change suddenly was changeable, right? We experienced that greatly in worship alone, and how we do discipleship ministry, shifting it to being online.
I think it just goes back to, we've been given a holy permission as leaders and innovators that we've never been given before, because the pandemic has it's made it necessary, right? Yeah. We haven't had a choice. We either adapt and we change, or we fold. And I don't know about you, but for a leader for the kingdom of God, that's not an option. That's just not an option. I was thinking back, if your first name is Reverend or Pastor, you got an email from Bishop Laurie back in March that said, I believe it was on a Saturday night, saying, hey, 12 hours later, consider not having in-person worship and for the foreseeable future. And all of a sudden we were like, what the what? I'm not a televangelist. I'm not a movie producer. How do we continue forward in our offering worship and in our church programming? And there was an immediate rush to get our content online by all means necessary. 90% of our churches in Iowa don't have in-house video capability pre-pandemic, but all of us carried around one of these things in our butt pockets. Sure. So we said, okay, well, we can get online. We can do this from our living rooms if we have to. We don't need support staff, or if we're serving in a smaller or mid-sized church, where we don't have support staff, hey, this can get it done. And the rush was simply just to get our content online. And for many of us, we thought, well, what works on Sunday in person will simply just work online. And we've been using words like what makes for good TV. And we've learned that what makes for good in-person worship doesn't necessarily make for good virtual online, worship, right? So we've had to adapt in those ways. But I think heading into 2021, the focus is no longer about content. It's about connection. I want to say that again. It's not about content, it's about connection. Most of us have figured out in some way or another how to get content out there. But what we've discovered, and I've been consulting with audio-visual systems and live streaming systems all over the conference for the last 8 years, and I'm in 3 different zip codes a week right now helping local churches all across Iowa get this capability up. But what I'm hearing from pastors is that when we got online, holy cow, views were through the roof. Some of our worship attendance doubled. Some of us even tripled what we were normally experiencing online. But what we've been seeing as the pandemic has been surging forward is that viewership is kind of waning. It's starting to drop a bit. And pastors are complaining that views are down because people are zoomed out, or maybe they're screened out. And sure, the spike in screen time that we've all had to experience, working from home and doing school from home and all that stuff has been a bit of a shock to our systems, mine included. But just because you personally feel screened out doesn't mean that culture is necessarily screened out. If you think people are screened out, run that theory by TikTok. Run that theory by Facebook or by the innovators of YouTube or Instagram. Apparently, people aren't nearly as done with screens as church leaders may think, just because we've been seeing a little bit of a wane here as of late, which leads us into the fourth trend that yes, content matters. We want to put the best message forward. We want to be faithful to the Bible and to the Scriptures and lead and teach in ways that not only where we're worshiping in spirit and truth, right? Where we're connecting with people's heads, but also navigating the 18 inches down to people's hearts, right? But what I'm saying is the Word of God matters immensely. But many Christians now realize they can watch or listen to their favorite preachers or ministry leaders from their living room any time of the day that they want to. So they do. And one approach from some leaders is to try to equate to that, to match exceptionally gifted speakers or leaders or presenters and communicators out there. But for most of us, if you're like me and if you're one of the rest of us, that's probably not a winning strategy. You won't be able to compete in that kind of arena. Growing churches, and I'm not talking about large churches, I'm talking about growing churches that are large, mid, and small-sized churches will realize that connection and community are going to win the day over content in the end, and they're going to focus their resources there in that arena. Carey Nieuwhof is a blogger that I follow, and he says something to the extent of no one should be able to out-local or out-community the local church, right? I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely produce the best content that you can, but make the goal of connecting with people. So how do you build community online instead of just another avenue for content consumption? Some of the things that we do here at First is we offer daily devotionals every night of the week at 6 p.m. There's another staff ministry or staff person or ministry leader who offers a devotion time. And it's not just let's put a message out there, but we're intentional about interacting with live stream comments and chats and trying to build connection and bridge points for people through the week and places not only of encouragement and biblical content, but connection with one another, right? It used to be frowned upon to talk in worship on Sunday morning. We used to have a slide here at the contemporary service that said, please silence your cell phone, but feel free to tweet the good stuff. It's always kind of been this thing, you don't talk or make noise in church. But now, holy cow, people are commenting all over the place during the live stream, during sermons and messages. And that's great because they're not just asking people, what did you have for breakfast? They're talking about matters of faith.
Yeah.
And there's intersections and connection points happening online in ways that actually don't happen when we're in person. You mentioned we had tried those Zoom coffee hours.
Yeah.
That's something that we tried. I've heard that being very successful in some ministry settings. Not really something that works so well for us here. We're going to retool that and maybe examine how we are a little bit more intentional about some fellowship and things like that. But
I think we made it too much about Bible study or something, and people were like, wait, I just came to fellowship.
They just came to connect.
Right.
And we missed that opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity to reboot. As innovators and adapters, you also have to be willing to say something that I was really passionate and enthusiastic about that I wanted to launch. If it's not working, you have to be willing, you have to be willing to take some things in ministry out behind the barn and shoot it. and say, this is not working.
Well, no, just take the puzzle piece out. That's the,
Well,
you know.
you're a little more elegant
Well,
than
I'm
I
just
am.
saying,
Yeah.
you don't have to shoot it.
Well, digital baptisms.
Okay.
We've had stuff like that happen
We
in
have.
worship,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we have this matter of ecclesiology. How do we do sacraments in a digital age? And heck, we were able to bring people in small group and distant and baptize in safe ways. And people in the live stream, when your pastor turns to the congregation and says, are you going to come alongside this person, help raise this person to faith? They could chime in on the live stream chat and say, yes, yes, yes. And I mean, all these moments in worship where there's connection happening that's
Yeah.
actually recorded and
recommitted.
documented. And then a family can actually take that and view that later and know, holy cow, this person is willing to stand with my kid, you know, or next to me if you're an adult being baptized. You know, we've been doing Wednesday night GPS groups where we've been holding pastor-led Bible studies on Wednesday night, but we came to find out, you know, 20 minutes of biblical content is really good so long as the content is good, but we spend 20, maybe even 25 minutes after that of connecting. How is it with your soul? How can we be praying with you? And that seems to have a lot more engagement when it's focused on connection. You know, the content is there. The content, we do everything we can to provide good content, but it's always coming back to connecting.
Yeah.
And right now, our biggest challenge is, you know, we had this challenge from the annual conference for your WIG, your wildly important goal. What is your intentional discipleship making pathway? And we had a stellar, I thought, a very good discipleship pathway here at our church. And then COVID hit and realized we have a whole nother community that's worshiping with us in a completely different way. So not only do we need to have in-person discipleship pathway, but we need a digital discipleship pathway.
Right.
So that's going to be a major part of our
We
work
were
and focus.
so ready for 2019 to always be the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If yesterday's church was tomorrow's church, holy cow, we'd be rocking.
That's right.
But we've had to innovate, and we've had to adapt. But the innovation, the adaptations have been focused more on connection than on content. And that's where I think we've been seeing the most fruit in ministry as we lead through a pandemic. And I think that's what's going to carry us beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so some other insights that I could give for this
I was
puzzle.
going to ask, Reverend, do you have any more puzzling pieces
I
to
do.
give us?
I do. Thanks for asking. That was a good segue.
I set you up.
So there's a blogger, somebody who blogs a thing called Leadership and Learning. His name's Kevin Eikenberry, and so I'm indebted to him. He actually talked about puzzle making and leadership, and so you can Google that and find some of these ideas come from him. One of them, I'll just say there's three that I want to bring up, but you know, I'll be brief. So take a break. So when you're making a puzzle, sometimes you get frustrated because you're not putting any pieces together. Suddenly, if you take some time off from puzzle making and go back to it, you're able to see things that you hadn't seen
Fresh
before.
eyes kind of thing.
Yeah, you just, all of a sudden, there's like 4 or 5 pieces that go together because you've taken some time off. So, I mean, we know this in the church. We know about Sabbath. We know about taking time for renewal and rest. I'm so thankful for the conference leadership that created some online content so that our churches, pastors, and staffs could take some time, a couple of weeks or weekends off, and not have to produce online content. So taking advantage of those things, very important during the pandemic to find ways of taking a break and finding renewal. The second thing is valuing together. So that's a part of our vision statement is that we're in this together. But it's also true in puzzle making in general. I was so much more into the puzzle making when my wife and Karen and my mother-in-law were helping with the puzzle making. They did some things. They collected some pieces of the puzzle in the colors that were like. They had all those kind of things. They organized straight pieces that were obviously for the outside, and they were helpful. But then they gave up. You know, they left me. Well, at least my mother-in-law, she left after Christmas, and then it was just me really working on this thing, and I was better together than when they walked away. So teamwork matters. Abe Lincoln said, "Everyone likes a compliment." I should have been more complimentary to how much they were helping me, and I might have been able to get some more help on my
Squeezed
my
a few more
puzzle.
miles out of that.
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
we're better together. Value together. Value working with the laity in your congregation. Find ways to engage them and help them to be a part of the ministry, even when the pandemic is making that somewhat difficult. We've got to value one another, and if you're on a staff, that means encouraging one another and pointing out the good things. Tom Landry was a coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and what made him set apart was one of his things was to always point out the winning play. He would always put together a video, mashup of the players' best plays and say, "See, you got it right there, you got it right there, you got it right there." The more that you kind of focus on the winning plays when you're working together, it's so much better to do that than to focus on where you made the hiccup or you needed to make some improvements. So
Yeah.
so times of listening together and giving one another space with lay leadership and staff leadership to do that and to know that we're better together. Finally, the final thing is those moments when I was putting the puzzle together before I gave up. There was a moment where I got all the edges, the whole edges were
the
all
border
in
of the
place. The
puzzle?
whole border. There's the
Okay.
word border. Yeah, the whole border was completed, and there was such a feeling of closure from doing that. And I got to say that's such a good feeling, right? When you get to that in a puzzle, we've not gotten to closure yet in this pandemic and leading through it together. But I got to say that I'm really thinking I'm going to get that puzzle back out. I'm gonna give it another try. I'm gonna try to see if we can't have some closure around putting that puzzle together. It was a 1,000-piece puzzle, so give me credit for the fact that it's not a small undertaking.
Well, according to your pictures, Karen may want to take a break.
Yeah, I should kind of come alongside her a little bit there. So I hope that our conversation today is kind of just a primer, a way of kind of having people think about their hopes and dreams for what they can do currently during these pandemic times and beyond. And someone certainly is going to be able to say, if these two can do it, I certainly can give it a shot, right? Yeah. So we're hopeful that you'll continue to ponder on this and join us for the various workshops, breakout sessions that are going to happen here at 3 o'clock. You got more to say on how people get connected with that?
Yeah, so just a couple of housekeeping details. Breakout sessions will start at 3, and those can be found right on the website, probably where you're watching right now. Go to www.aboutfirst.com/leading. And that will take you to the breakout sessions. Those will be hosted by various ministry persons from the Iowa Annual Conference, and you will be joining those via Zoom. So with that, we pray blessings over you and your ministry as you continue to lead through this pandemic and set up for well beyond it as well. So God bless you, and thank you for being here today.